if you want to win the Tour, and this has been true for a few years now, your threshold power is going to have to be about 7 watts per kilogram. And you're going to have to be able to repeat that effort, not in hour-long chunks, but in, let's say, 20 to 30 to 40-minute chunks throughout the race. There's currently only 2 riders in the world who can do that, and that's Jonas, a healthy Jonas Vingegaard, and Tadej Pogačar.
Welcome to the Move podcast. Today we're going to cover the 2024 Dauphiné Libéré. I'm JB Hager, but much more important is our other 2 hosts, Spencer Martin, who you know from our show Outcomes and Beyond the Peloton newsletter. And he's going to put in his expert advice. So expect some stats and numbers today. I guarantee you're going to get it. So it's going to be interesting. And George Hincapie, of course, you know well. And also, I didn't know this until today, 3-time stage winner at the Dauphiné. Because that was your usual prep leading up to the Tour, right? Was that your preferred, or did you guys do Tour de Suisse?
I wouldn't say preferred. Actually, I did probably just as many Tour of Switzerland as I did Dauphiné. It just depended on what Johan had planned for us and what we had done leading up to the month of June. So it really was just kind of random. Although I would say Lance primarily did the Dauphiné, but he also did a couple of Tour of Switzerland as well instead. So it was just really depending on the year.
Did you prefer one over the other, personally?
I mean, in Switzerland, the roads were a lot nicer. Hotels were usually nicer. But you also got a really nice break after the Dauphiné. You get 3 weeks. So you were able to, slice out a nice chunk of time to either recover or kind of sharpen the knife, so to speak, after the Dauphiné. There was more time, where Switzerland, you had about 10 days or less than 2 weeks before you had to be at the team presentation and all that. So it was, in that sense, I guess I preferred Dauphiné because you had more time. But I would say the roads were generally nicer in Switzerland than in the Dauphiné.
And roads make a difference when they seem to be hitting the deck more these days, right?
Yeah.
But of those, and we'll do this for fun, of those 3 wins, which was the most memorable, and what's the short version of how it went down?
Well, one of them I won prologue. I think I beat Alberto Contador by a second. It was a hard prologue too. It was a straight uphill for 2K, and then very technical downhill, and then a couple K flat. Short, it was probably 6, 7, 8K. And I believe I won by a second, but I had made it. It was definitely a confirmation that I was in very good shape. That was 2005, and then I won the prologue, and then the last stage as well in a breakaway with Popovich, who was my teammate, and I think it was Geneva or I forget where, but it was a very, very tough circuit at the end. So I won that one, and then 2009 I won on HCC, and that was kind of a lucky win. It was a group of 40 guys. We had a pretty hard climb right before the finish, kind of similar to what happened today in Switzerland. Downhill to the finish. There wasn't any sprinter team leadouts left. And I just kind of snuck away with 2K to go or 1,500 minutes to go before the last corner with one other guy and ended up beating him pretty easily in the sprint. So it was kind of a nice surprise, lucky win in 2009.
We'll have to go see if those are on YouTube and revisit them.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can find on YouTube. I tell you, people keep adding stuff. We're going to get into the results and American results, which I'm sure George is going to be very excited to talk about. And we'll do that in just a second. But first, I got to tell you about a couple of our partners, first being Cuts. I love just throwing on a T-shirt. I don't like to think about what I'm wearing. I'm not a fancy dresser, but I want a T-shirt to look nice. Even if you're in a professional sense, like a meeting, it's got to look good and fit good. And what else was also really cool about Cuts is it's wrinkle free. If you travel a lot, you got to throw a lot in a bag. You get there, you got to pull it out. You don't have to iron it. You don't have to steam it, all that stuff. And I'll tell you a quick story. Over the weekend, it's hitting triple digits in Austin, Texas. And my wife and I had to go to something. And I was like, do I have to wear pants? I didn't want to. And she's like, yes, wear pants. And I look in my closet, and then it was either jeans or really dressy pants, like almost suit pants. And I was like, I was at a loss. And I grabbed the pair of Cuts pants that they sent me, and it was perfect. Because they actually are real breathable and comfortable and cool. And, George, you live in a hot place too. And so if you got, you're wearing pants, you want it to be able to be breathable and comfortable. And it is definitely that. For a limited time, you can save money while redefining the dress code by heading to cutsclothing.com and use the code WEDU, WEDU, for 20% off. And today's show also brought to you by Tushy. I finally got mine installed, and like Lance said, it was easier than I thought. And it took no time at all. And then, of course, what happened after that? My daughter comes over to visit. She lives about 10 minutes away. And she's like, wait, what is this? And she's like, I want one. Will you get me one? So over the weekend, I was installing that at her place. And again, it took no time at all. And it's just basically an add-on to your existing toilet. It turns it into a bidet and makes staying tidy much, much easier and much better. I think that's what's really important. Join the 3 million butts who have already made the switch to Tushy. For limited time, our listeners get 10% off the entire order when you use the code WEDO at checkout. That's 10% on your order at hellotushy.com with the promo code WEDO. All right. I defer to you, Spencer, to do kind of the breakdown of things, but let's start at the big story. And the big story is the form of Primož Roglič. Second biggest, well, maybe the biggest if you're an American, is Matteo Jorgenson. We'll get to that. And then if you're big weekend for North America as well. But let's start with Roglič, his form, and I'm sure you're going to get into Remco Evenepoel, who started out looking like he was going to crush this thing and then slipping. So let's start with Remco.
Yeah. So if we start at the end, the poetic symmetry here. So Primož wins, like you said, but not exactly, if you're watching stage 6, I was on Friday, stage 7, Saturday, he's just dominating. And it's, you can almost go on cruise control as a viewer. You're like, all right, I know what's going to happen on stage 8. He's going to dominate. He doesn't. Almost loses the race. I was shocked, by the way. Like, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, like, he's just managing the gap. And it was dicey there at the end. Like, I thought Matteo, the last kilometer, I thought Matteo had it. I was jumping around at like 5:30 in the morning watching this thing. Doesn't get it. 8 seconds between Roglič and Jorgenson. Jorgenson, actually, I guess is how it says. At the end, Derek G. third. We should talk about him in a little bit. That's a revelation for Israel Premier Tech. Remco, the one you asked about, finishes 7th place, 225 back. I would say oddly, stage 8 was his best day outside of the time trial. He finishes 8th, 58 seconds back. And then so just to sum this up, to unpack this, Remco Evenepoel, the team I think said coming into this, or they were like leaking information saying he's not here for the GC. This is just getting back on track. Smart expectation setting, I guess. But the time trial, clearly he was in shape. He roasts that time trial. He put something like 22 seconds into Josh Tarling in the final 10K. So he was flying through that thing. Underwhelming in the Alps. Like, frankly, that's concerning. If you're looking at him for a tour, like to contend at the tour, the fact that he can't keep up with Derek G in the Alps, that's not good at all. Stage 8, he's 58 seconds back to Carlos Rodriguez and Matteo Jorgenson. If you just pull out from there and you say we're 3 weeks away from the tour, he's getting dropped by those guys and G and Lawrence de Plus, that's not good. That's a problem. And I know that the team will say, oh, he was just here to ride into things. I went back through. It's actually incredibly rare, almost unheard of for riders to contend at the tour without finishing in the top 4 of a major June stage race / Tour of Slovenia, because Pogačar has started to do Tour of Slovenia recently. It kind of spoils the sample a little bit. But I mean, George, like you would come to these races with a contender for the tour. And if Lance was getting dropped in the Alps consistently, finishing 7th in the GC, I'm pretty sure there'd be a little bit of concern inside the team. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, he crushed the TT, but it'd be kind of hard to imagine him getting that much better on the climbs in the next 3 weeks. There's small things you can do. Probably go to altitude camp, do some more efforts once you're recovered. But for him to get those major gains on the climbs, I can't see it. And it didn't look like he was taking it easy, so to speak. I mean, it looked like he was all in, trying to hang on for as long as possible, and getting dropped by riders that you wouldn't typically see him getting dropped by. I mean, this is a guy that has, shown himself in Grand Tours. and is centered the whole year around the Tour de France. Of course, he had a couple hiccups with the crash back in Pays Basque, but yeah, it was surprising to see him having a lackluster climbing form. That's for sure.
I mean, it's career long. I guess that would be the big thing, because you could say, oh, he's just not recovered from the crash. From what I could find, I went back and looked. I believe he's finished in the front group in an Alpine mountain stage exactly 0 times in his career. You know, so at this point, you have a pretty big sample size. He's been pro since 2019. And the Alps and the Pyrenees are a problem. Think about the stage where he had an issue at the Vuelta last year. It's when they went into the Pyrenees, did the Tourmalet, and he's dropped on the first climb. And, you know, the weirdest thing about Remco to me, if you watch these stages, like I'm thinking of stage 6, he gets dropped early, and then he looks actually pretty good for a lot of the climb. So you wonder what's that about? Is that mental? It doesn't seem to be physical. Like, it seems like the power is there, the engine's there. It's just almost like a moment of doubt early on in the climb. And that's what happened at last year's Vuelta. And I don't totally know how to square that. I know you could say it's like the Joao Almeida, like ride your own pace, and that's more efficient. But if you're not in the group, in the let's say the grade is 6 or 7%, you're putting out a lot more power by yourself than you would just be sitting in the group at the front. So it's not a winning. That's not a winning formula for Grand Tours.
Agreed. And it might be a mental thing there, Spencer, because a guy like that who's so good, so young, so dominant, I think it's just used to feeling very good and very confident on the climbs and just being able to crush people. Correct me if I'm wrong. He did win a mountaintop finish in the Vuelta last year against Jonas. Wasn't that a pretty hard finish
in the Vuelta last year?
I thought he did. Against 2 years ago.
Oh, here we go.
I kind of seem to remember. I kind of seem to remember him sprinting in a small group of 10 guys, and he crushed that sprint uphill. Of course, it was an uphill sprint, but it was a very hard finish, if I'm remembering correctly.
Like out of a GC group or a breakaway?
A GC group.
Oh, okay. I remember what you're talking about, stage 3 of the Vuelta. But the thing is, that was I guess I should have qualified that. I'm talking about days where there's multiple classified climbs back to back. So he's very good on, let's say, flat day, mountain, like a hockey stick Vuelta stage. Like the Vuelta he won, there was a lot of that. He's really good at that. Where he seems to crack is if, let's say, 3 Cat 1s at an HC climb. You know, that was stage 7 of the Dauphiné. And I don't know. Yeah, it's like, you know, if you've ever ridden or raced, you know the feeling. You're sitting in a group on a climb, and it's almost like you kind of feel like you got punched in the stomach. And it's, I don't know if that's happening. And it's like, I'm not used to this. I don't know what to do. And a bit of panic sets in.
Correct. Yeah. Like I said, maybe mentally he's just thinking, he's used to being so much better than everybody that if he's struggling and there's still 10 guys left, it's kind of like not in his realm of understanding. And perhaps that's why all of a sudden he gets a little bit frustrated or let's go with the wheel. And then he settles into his rhythm and does an okay climb. So there's something going on there, which is, it doesn't seem very normal. And I mean, like we keep saying, he is a young rider. He did dominate the time trial. So there is still hope for him being successful at the Tour de France. But what they're showing, I mean, even Primož, for that matter, he wasn't dominating by any means of the Dauphiné. So far, Pogačar is just head over heels above anybody. And we all know I'm a huge fan of Primož, and I want to see him finally do it. But he's going to have to get a lot better. Of course, he had some bad crashes in the Dauphiné and getting over a very bad crash at Pays Basque as well. And still wins the Dauphiné. Let's not forget that. He still won the Dauphiné. He's still riding really well. Still has 3 weeks to sharpen that knife. But I'm hoping he has some big increases. And Spencer, you put together a very, very cool data sheet on comparing their watts per kg on all the climbs. I think you should discuss that a bit because it was super interesting.
Well, I think George's question on our text thread was like, does anyone have some statistics, some comparisons to Pogačar, and then what we saw with Remco? Was that correct? That's how you teed it up. So what do you know?
And Primož.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question, George, because I feel like in the media, especially, all these races. So the Giro happened, and then that's wiped from the mind. The Dauphiné happens, and it's like, oh, Primož Roglič is the favorite for the Tour now. It's like, whoa, wait a second. Let's let's weigh these against each other, because when Primož goes to the Tour, he's going to have to race against Tadej Pogačar and probably Jonas Vingegaard. And so his actual climbing performance, like weighted, will matter, not just against the people in this race. Because if we're being honest, this Dauphiné he's not the world's best Grand Tour contenders, even though they're very good riders. So Primož on stage 6, the final climb, like 31 minutes. And these are the oddly really hard climbs. Stage 6 and 7 both finished on, it's like 11K, around 9%, 10% average. So really tough climbs. He's putting out about, these are all estimated because Primož doesn't release his power. So about 6.4 watts per kilo for 31 minutes on stage 6. Stage 7, a little bit lower, 6.1 for 31 minutes. And then that's probably why Jorgenson was right with him, because he wasn't quite as strong as the day before. And those are very good, like elite power numbers. The problem is Tadej Pogačar at the Giro d'Italia, and this is a much higher elevation than we saw at this Dauphiné. On stage 15, the knockout blow, you'd say, on that Queen stage, this is at the end of like 6,000 kgs in the legs, kilojoules in the legs already. He attacks 20 minutes, close to 7 watts per kilo for that attack, for 20 minutes. And then if you go to Monte Grappa on the final stage, the final 45 minutes of the second climb of Monte Grappa, which is an hour-long climb, that's like 6.4 watts per kilo for the final 45 minutes, 1,700 VAM. And the VAM on Monte Grappa is steep. It's like 8%. So the VAM... Could you
refresh everybody on VAM? I know we brought it up on the show before, but it's been a while.
George is the reason we've been talking about VAM so much. You brought it up, but it's a good measure of how fast you're climbing. It's just like vertical meters ascended per hour. The thing where VAM can be misleading, like you look at Primož's VAM on stage 6 for that 31-minute climb, it's like 1,800 meters per hour. And then if you look at Monte Grappa, where Pogačar attacked, it's 1,700 VAM per hour. And you might think, oh, Primož was going faster. But the thing is, the steeper the slope, the higher your VAM is going to be. So it does vary depending on, it's not as objective as power or watts per kilogram. But in short, if you want to win the Tour, and this has been true for a few years now, your threshold power is going to have to be about 7 watts per kilogram. And you're going to have to be able to repeat that effort, not in hour-long chunks, but in, let's say, 20 to 30 to 40-minute chunks throughout the race. There's currently only 2 riders in the world who can do that. And that's a healthy Jonas Vingegaard and Tadej Pogačar. Primož, as great as he is, as much as I love him, he's just not at that level. Maybe he was at one point, but now he's into his mid-30s, and the level he was riding at this Dauphiné is probably not good enough to win the Tour, assuming nothing happens to Pogačar and that Vingegaard is healthy. Obviously, this gets more complicated and more interesting if something happens to either of those 2 guys, or they're not prepared for the Tour. Then you could see Primož's climate performances at this Dauphiné being good enough to win the Tour.
I'll add to this. Roglič hit the deck twice.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Man. So we don't know the extent of that. Like, he could have been pretty banged up and still pulled this off. That may explain why he was struggling on the last day. Sometimes that takes a day or 2 to kick in.
I agree. They said he couldn't even reach into his pocket to grab food with the one shoulder that was injured. So that certainly has an effect. And for him to keep going and win the next stage after that bad crash, and then perhaps struggle 2 days later on the last stage. Okay, I think a lot of that has to do with the crash. As you get older, the crashes affect you more as well. So hopefully he can produce a few more numbers. His team looked good. Vlasov is doing some incredible pacing for him. Bob Jungels. He's got a hit squad of a team that I think is only going to get stronger. Perhaps they're even going to add Danny Martinez to the roster. I don't know if they've officially announced that yet, but he got second place in the Giro. So he's going to have a rock star team behind him at the Tour de France. I just hope he can stay upright and reach his peak fitness, because we want to see a battle on the Tour. We don't want to see Pogačar running away with it like he did in the Giro. I want to see these guys all coming in guns blazing, so to speak, and make it a really exciting Tour.
We've spent a bunch of time already this season talking about how it looks like Visma Lease Bike's season's just been so banged up, literally banged up. Everyone's injured. But yet we saw this unbelievable performance from 24-year-old Matteo Jorgenson. and nearly pulled off the Dauphiné win. It was for those who didn't watch, spoiler alert, you wouldn't be tuning in here if you didn't expect that. It was an 8-second gap. How much time did he make up on that last stage on Roglič? It was pretty phenomenal.
48 seconds. But he also got a 6-second time bonus. Finished right behind Carlos Rodriguez, who got the 10-second time bonus. I'm curious to ask you guys. So he dropped him about, what was that? It was like 4.8K to go. Primož is distanced. Could Matteo have done anything else to win that? And, obviously winning the stage, that gets him even closer. So right then he's 4 seconds back instead of 8 seconds back. But it kind of looked like he wasn't pulling through with Derek G initially. I mean, maybe that's just because G was pulling so hard he couldn't. And then he came to the front when it got flatter towards the top, and that's probably why he couldn't sprint, because he was just pulling so hard, and he figured the 4 seconds I'm going to surrender are a worthwhile investment for the time I'll make up by going all out. But I was curious, especially with you, George, like what would you have done in that situation?
I think they were at maximum effort. 8th day of a really hard stage race, last climb of the race. I don't think he left any cards on the table. I think he was all in, and basically just went as hard as he can go to the finish line. And I'm sure he was a little bit surprised that Primož got dropped, but I don't think he made any mistakes. And like you said, he couldn't even sprint. He was on Rodriguez's wheel, and he said, "Okay, I'm just going to hang on, try not to lose any time to him, and hopefully gain those extra 8 seconds that he needed for the GC win." But I mean, what an incredible season he's having, winning in Belgium, one-day classics races, to winning the Paris-Nice, to second place in the Dauphiné. It's about as good as it gets for his season so far. And whether or not Jonas comes back to full fitness is going to be a big question. But in a way, it'd be great for American cycling fans if he doesn't, because we're going to see Jorgenson going for battling out for stage wins, perhaps the podium of the Tour de France. I mean, this kid can do anything, and it's just really exciting to watch him to progress. And I just hope that he has some free cards to play there in the Tour de France.
And how good is this for American cycling? I mean, George, it was huge in your era, and then the big slump, and and this is on the heels of Sepp Kuss, winning the Vuelta, and now this. Like, there's just this emergence of talent. It's happening. Like I feel like it's cycling up big time. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, and we're not even talking about all the other guys out there. Nielsen Paulus, Quinn Simmons, who's been off this whole year, but the talent level. I mean, Sepp obviously didn't have a great Dauphiné. Hoping, he bounces back for the Tour de France. Obviously, won the Vuelta last year, so we're seeing a real emergence of talent here in the United States, and I think it's just going to continue to progress. It's going to motivate the young kids to work harder and to get to that level and keep us in the forefront.
What's crazy about this Jorgenson Visma story is I think how key of a signing that was in the offseason. And it was just seen as like a throwaway, like, oh, he's going from Movistar to Visma. He's never going to see the front of a race again, or he's only going to see the front of a race because he's just going to be working for other people. What a waste of a career. And now it's just like every time they need a win, it's like, hey, Matteo, can you come to this race? Because we don't have anyone else and we need you. Oh, can you win a one-day Cobble Classic and then also try to win the Critérium du Dauphiné? Like, George, I mean, when's the last time you saw an American this versatile, like to win a cobbled World Tour race and then?
Yeah, I don't think people quite understand how different these types of races are. It's just the complete opposite of the spectrum. And you got to have tons of power, almost be sort of a boxer to win these classics one-day races. I mean, they're hard. You need like mad watts to be able to get over these short, steep hills. You need crazy positioning skills. Typically, a lot of the things climbers don't have. Matteo Jorgenson has it all. I mean, the guy can position himself well when it's a hectic battle for position. He can climb well. He can sprint over the short, steep climbs, which is what is needed to win the classic races, and climb the Alps with the best in the world. This is a diamond in the rough, and just been incredible to watch him this season. He's been so good, and like I mentioned, Sepp's his teammate. if he bounces back too, we're going to have some of the best guys in the Tour de France, 2 Americans on the same team. So I think it's going to be really, really exciting to watch.
What's the GC strategy, you think, for Visma? Is it?
Well, I think it's just all a question of, they've been so quiet about Jonas, his training, what he's doing. And it was funny. I read, where did I read on one of the outlets said that Maxime, the director of UAE, is like, Jonas is a favorite for the Tour de France. He's won it 2 years in a row. I mean, that's complete BS. I mean, we all know who the favorite for the Tour de France is, but he's obviously trying to take a little bit of the workload off of his team for the beginning of the Tour, playing political games, trying to throw some pressure their way. But anybody that knows anything about the sport knows that they are the clear favorites. And Jonas he's the unknown right now. We don't know how. We obviously know when he's at his best, he's the only one in the world that can climb with Pogačar. But how long does it take to recover from a punctured lung? How long does 6 weeks off the bike allegedly take to get back to full fitness? And it's not an easy start to the Tour de France. It never is. But they're starting in Tuscany with tons of climbing and windy roads and a lot of stress that I always say is very hard to mimic no matter how good you train. It's hard to mimic those types of race scenarios in training. So I don't know. I hope Jonas is back to his best, but I'm going to be surprised if he is. So if he's not, then you got, hopefully Sepp will be back to 100%, and Matteo Jorgenson is either going to go for the podium or go for some great mountain stage wins, which I think would be fun to watch.
I do think I think Matteo, I really think he can have a great tour. The guy just continues to surprise us. Remember, we talked to him after Paris-Nice, and I was thinking, like, this is the highlight of his year. And then this is, I would say, even in
that was career made
result. Yeah. But I think it might be, and I could regret saying this, I think it might be time to send the Sepp Kuss Tour de France GC ambitions out to pasture. I don't know if that's happening. If he's like this right now, it seems like that first week could be a problem. Like, the first stage has 5 categorized climbs. They do the Galibier in stage 4. I think now the goal should be Sepp third week tour or third week mountain domestique, kind of his original role. I would assume is the goal, since he's really not in a good place at the moment.
Well, do you remember?
Yeah, he's downplayed his GC Tour de France chances a bunch, but I mean, he won the Tour of Spain. We can never take that away from him. He was climbing with the best in the world, arguably better than Jonas at times, better than Primož at times. I just think hopefully he just had an off week this week in the Dauphiné, and maybe fighting a little illness, or maybe just saving it for the Tour. Who knows? Not typical, especially at the Dauphiné 3 weeks before the Tour. But we can't write him off. I think I hope that he'll be back to his normal self at the Tour.
But you remember earlier last year when we were talking about Sepp Kuss doing all 3 Grand Tours, and people said that's crazy, you shouldn't do it. Now it turned out to be great, career made, no regrets, I'm sure. But do riders get like a long-term fatigue? Because they used to not try to cook young riders too early, right? You'd had to get legs, and then you'd be more of a Grand Tour rider at age 27, 28. Like, did he just get cooked? And again, I'll preface it by saying, well worth it last season. But is there a real long-term effect from what he did?
That's a great question, JB. I don't think there's that many studies, because not many people have done 3 Grand Tours in 1 year in a row. Very rare does that happen. But not only did he just participate in them, he was a key factor in all 3 of them. So he dug super deep in all 3 of them, and who knows? You might have a point there. I hope not, but I mean that's a ton of workload for any rider at any age, at any point in their career, to not only just ride 3 Grand Tours, but to do what he did in all 3 of them is something I don't remember ever seeing in our sport.
That's a good question, JB. After he did that, I thought that it would catch on, that everyone would be like, the secret to winning the Vuelta is doing the Giro and the Tour for GC beforehand. And then now it's like everyone's shredding those plans. Do you know how many Grand Tours Adam Hansen did in a row? Do you guys know this?
He did a bunch. I know that.
He was 20
when I mentioned that. Yeah. He's a freak.
That's nuts.
I was teammates with Adam Hansen, and we'd go out for rides in Mallorca, like 6-hour rides, come back. Go do another 2 hours. He would just like ride all day long, and many times couple more hours than anybody that would ride on a team at training camps. I mean, the guy was just a freak.
We saw arguably one of the worst crashes. I mean, we've had worse crashes with broken bones and collarbones and punctured lungs. But just visually, like if you're on social media at all, you saw it. It looked like they all slid a quarter mile. And then that stage ended up being neutralized and they just getting everybody in safe. But your thoughts on that? Because my thought when I saw that, I was like, now I think I'm understanding why people are opting for more altitude training versus race training of the pure risk. I mean, look how many seasons have been destroyed by injury. What were your thoughts when you saw that wild crash in the rain?
I was very concerned seeing Remco and Primož on the ground going, oh, great. Now the tour is going to be even more boring because those guys are gone. But I was happy to see them both get up. And yeah, that's one of those crashes. In fact, I spoke with Mark Cavendish like the next day. We had a very similar crash going through a tunnel at 40 miles an hour in Switzerland. We went through this tunnel. It was dark and it was wet. And all of a sudden, it was like a war zone. All you heard was carbon smashing, people screaming, and you couldn't see what was going on. I basically just shut my eyes and prayed that I would get through this mass carnage of people sliding, because I knew if I hit the brakes, I'm done also. Because in those really super sketchy moments where there's something on the road or the road becomes like ice, you tap the brakes for a second, you're going down no matter what. Somehow I managed to get through that crash, but it reminded me a lot of that crash minus the tunnel. And there's just nothing you can do except, keep your fingers crossed and hope that you can get through safely. And, fortunately that doesn't happen very often, but there are those times where you just all of a sudden just hit these patches of who knows what. And a lot of people are going to go down.
I mean, is there anything like afterward, Richard Pluga, who I can understand his frustration, the GM at Visma, like what a bad year they've had with injuries, was saying, oh, this wouldn't happen in F1. But the funny thing is it does kind of happen in F1. Like if you watched Monaco a few years ago, they're just all sliding around.
Yeah, I was in Monaco. They neutralized the race after I think the first lap, and it was like an hour delay. So it happens. And I read all the reports where it was dry 10 minutes before that. They were going up a climb. It was a nice day. And then 10 minutes later, it was downpour. So you can't blame anybody for that. It was just, this weird freak of nature thing that happened. And unfortunately, a lot of guys paid the price for it.
I guess the second part of that question was, does the altitude preps it make so much more sense now? I mean, you guys always had to race. You've mentioned many times, I can't believe they're not racing to get ready for their big event. Like, how do you be prepped without race time? This altitude thing starting to make a lot more sense just for staying healthy.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the risks are a lot lower at altitude. Everything is much more controlled. Your whole environment is completely controlled. You're not switching hotels every day. Even though the best teams have a lot of these things figured out and super dialed, it's still really hard to control environments when you're changing hotels every day around different people every day at the races. So in that sense, yes, it's a lot less risky to be at altitude training. But I still think you need to race once in a while to get that final sharpening of the knife.
Yeah, I don't think you can show up to the tour. I mean, this is the Dauphiné. This is not some Pannekuchen festival here. This is like a key tour final check mark. I don't think you could show up at the tour not having raced all year. And then I guess on that logic, you have to race at some point. Like the opening stage of the tour might be more dangerous than every stage of the Dauphiné combined, and if you don't have any racing skills at that point, you're probably more likely to crash.
Yeah. Yeah. We keep talking about how much better the braking is. So how much quicker the braking is. So how much quicker your reaction time has to be when there's a crash or something in front of you that you have to avoid, which in training, you're whipping around at altitude camp with your headphones on, listen to music and focus on your watts. You never have to react that quickly as you do in a race.
I know we have a few more things to talk about. a look ahead at the Tour de France a little bit more. Before we do that, I want to tell you about a couple of more of our partners. Now, we've been working with AG1 for several years now, and it's amazing. Like when we first started, which wasn't too terribly long ago, 3 years ago, maybe 4, you had to explain to everyone what AG1 was. You had to say athletic greens because people didn't know. Now, everyone on the planet knows what AG1 is. That as simple as that. You don't even have to spell it out. You even see some other products trying to attack them because they're the standard. They are absolutely the gold standard. If you're not getting enough veggies, or you just want to make sure you're getting all the vitamins and nutrients you need, then this is your daily answer. And they make it super simple. I take the big packets at home, pour them into a container. I take the travel packs whenever I go anywhere to make sure I get it every single day. Everybody on the team's been doing it. We've all made it a part of our routine. So try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3. Yes, most people are deficient in vitamin D, plus K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase exclusively at drinkag1.com/themove. That's drinkag1.com/themove. Today's show is also brought to you by Caldera Lab, a leader in men's skincare. Something I never thought I would say growing up and into my young adult life, men's skincare. I'm so happy being introduced to Caldera Lab a few years ago from this show, and now it's part of my daily routine. Clinical trials have found 94% of men's skin show an overall younger looking appearance after using it for just a few weeks. Why not give it a try? I use the daily moisturizer. It actually feels weird now after I've been doing it for some time, to even go out the door and have not put it on. And then I use the good at night, which just, it smells good and it just does wonders for your skin. And that's my routine. I do it morning and night, and it has helped my skin look more youthful, more healthy, fewer lines. It keeps improving over time, and people have noticed a difference. Get 20% off with the code WEDO at calderalab.com and make the unforgettable first impressions. Again, that's 20% off at Caldera with a C, calderalab.com with the code WEDO. Last but not least, another one of our favorites. Everyone on the team, we're practically fighting over our ketone IQ when we get together for the tour. People do it first thing in the morning. We probably hit another shot right before we do the show. And then you guys probably do another shot before you go on your ride. And it helps. Like, I know you guys, mainly because you're actually professional athletes, unlike myself, you probably notice a difference in your performance and how you feel. I notice a difference in my mental clarity since I've started using Ketone IQ. It has helped tremendously. And I've said this before on the JB Squared show. I've been off Adderall for a year now, after 20 some years of it, and I'm doing fine. And I attribute it to Ketone IQ. It has really, really helped with the mental clarity and sharpness all the time. You can save 30% off your first subscription, and I highly recommend getting a subscription. Give it 3-6 months, and I guarantee you're going to look back and go, wow, this was so worth it. But do the subscription, save the 30%, try it a little longer, and see if you notice the results like I did. Go to hvmn.com/themove. Again, visit hvmn.com/themove and subscribe upon checkout for 30% off. All right. I know you have probably a bunch of loose end notes, Spencer, but one of the thing I had is to talk about Josh Tarling in that time trial, which is pretty impressive. And this is a young rider that I'm trying to remember if this is a name that's ever been mentioned on this show.
We talked about him at the World Championships last year. If you remember our show after the time trial World Championships, because he finished, I believe, third at the World Time Trial Championships. He's supposed to be, it's funny, if you talk to a lot of people inside the sport, they have him tipped to win the Olympic time trial. My pushback was, this guy Remco Evenepoel is pretty good. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but yeah, Tarling is, I mean, talk about a revelation. And I don't know if you noticed this climbing in the last few days, like shockingly good climbing. He's only 20 years old, so it does seem like Ineos has potentially stumbled along another potential GC rider. And if an interesting trend, if you look at the GC at this race, like the big rider is back. Like Matteo Jorgenson, big guy. Derek G, big guy. Or Lazcano, who finished 9th. He kind of had a rough final day, but was climbing really well before then on Movistar. Big guy. So Tarling could definitely fit into that mold. Like if you're Tarling, you're looking at Jorgensen thinking, that could be me in a few years. Like this, he didn't win the time trial. He got beat by Remco Evenepoel, we could say, because he lost a ton of time in the final net uphill section. But like really impressive ride. Like
let me remind people, 20 years old, his first year on Ineos. It's like that's a lot to tackle.
and they had Rodriguez who won the last stage. Who's what?
I think he was on the team last year.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. 23. You're right. My bad.
So second year in Ineos.
Yeah.
Well, with Rodriguez,
go ahead, Spencer.
I mean, kind of. I would say he's like goes under the radar. Like in the last 12 months, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, he won a stage of the Tour. You could say one of the hardest stages of the Tour, and this guy has no sprint whatsoever. Won the hardest stage of the Tour, wins the overall at Basque Country, I believe, or does he win? No, he wins his final stage of the Basque Country, wins the overall at Romandy, and then wins the final stage of the Dauphiné, all without the ability to sprint. Pretty impressive from him. And you kind of wonder, I mean, he got fifth at the Tour last year. Going into the Tour, like that's a stacked squad they have with Bernal, Grant Thomas, Tom Pidcock. He's probably the out-and-out leader at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how Bernal does in Tour of Switzerland. It seems like he's been riding really well as of late. Probably building back his confidence after that nasty crash he had. But yeah, so far Rodriguez, like you said, he's kind of slid under the radar in many ways and winning some really, really hard races. And they're going to have a stacked squad as well, the Tour de France.
I mean, did you guys see this ride from Derek G coming? I still can't fully get over this. Like, I know. I remember he had like 5-second places at last year's Giro, and then he had some injury problems, was slowly building back. I thought, oh, this guy's just like a stage winner. He's going to win a bunch of stages in his career. I did not see this GC ride coming. And
I don't think he did either. If you watch the post interviews, he seemed as surprised and thrilled and excited, like not expected.
The Giro,
long way in the time trial too.
Oh wow, the Giro you saw. Okay, well, a guy's all of a sudden making all these breakaways, clearly on peak form. Incredible ride at the Giro. That was awesome. But what he did at the Dauphiné, completely different. I mean, he won an uphill sprint, essentially dropped the best guys in the world off of his wheel, and won that sprint handily. That was very impressive to watch. Then climbing with the best guys in the world, finished in third place in the overall. I mean, this is a complete different story than making breakaways in the Giro d'Italia. What an impressive ride. I feel like that was the standout performance of the Dauphiné, in my opinion.
I mean, is his agent's phone blowing up, or like what's going on here? Like, it does seem like it's been a trend over the last few months. Maybe I need to flesh this out a little bit more.
Well, Israel Premier Tech has him locked in till 2028.
Well, yeah,
that seems like a lifetime ahead, doesn't it?
We are seeing these long-term contracts appear to be more negotiable than like think of. I
would say he's pretty happy. I mean, he's a Canadian guy. He's probably got real thankful to be on a team sponsored by a Canadian. So I think he's unless he's going to get paid a ton of money, I would guess that he's pretty happy where he's at.
But so Jorgensen left Movistar because he just felt like the attention to detail at Visma was going to help his career. Clearly the right decision in retrospect. Like, do you think Israel Premier Tech's dumping, think of Ineos has a guy on staff. I bet he makes mid 6 figures. His whole job is just figure out how to make them go faster in the time trial. Yeah. Like, do you think Israel Premier Tech has that?
I think that they all have maybe not as much as the resources as UAE or Ineos.
They're still paying the big. They're still paying the big Froome bill, aren't they?
Everyone else is on ramen.
But I think it's a standard feature now to have 2 to 4 nutritionists on the team, trainers. I mean, they all are now pretty dialed in that sense. Of course, some are better than others, but I wouldn't be surprised if Israel's Premier Tech is. Are
you saying like even the lower budgets? Probably it's more than you guys had when Postal.
I know. Uno X is probably, I would say mid-range budget-wise, or maybe even on the lower end in terms of World Tour teams. They have 3 nutritionists on the team. I rode with Thor Hudson when I was in France 2 weeks ago, and he was saying, that's like standard now. We all have nutritionists. They all have access to their nutritionists where they're like, hey, I'm riding 4 hours today. What do I need to eat before, during, after? Guessing game is sort of out of it. And I think most of the teams are at that level now.
I mean, do you think Primož Roglič is as good on Bora as he was on Visma?
So far, no, but he has had some bad crashes, so I don't think we've been able to see his the full extent of his form and the team backing. I mean, they're coming in with Red Bull big time with the Tour de France, so I feel like they are going to maybe even match or outdo what Visma has done in terms of support and innovations in nutrition, in their position, in all types of things. I think we're just starting to see the potential of what that team's going to bring Primož, and I hope he bounces back from this crash. Clearly, he comes away with a big win of the Dauphiné, probably confident as well, because we all know you lose a couple of percentage points after bad crashes like that, and he'll have to just hope that he doesn't crash in the Tour de France.
Yeah, and I guess the team looked amazing, and look what they did with Danny Martinez. I mean, that was a really impressive Giro.
Yeah.
Do you think, let's say Derek G stays at Israel, like, could you realistically win the Tour de France on that team? I mean, I guess that's what Postal was like. It just slowly got built up into a tour winning team.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on. I mean, these days, you've seen what's happening with Trek Lidl. I mean, they got more money in, they've got more wins in this year. Decathlon, more money, they've been winning all year long.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the paper they bring in, the staff that they hire, and any team can reach that level. All it takes is money.
Yeah, I remember you guys talking about it a lot when. Let's see. What was it when we saw this freak talent Pogačar, and we were like, "Oh, UAE, they don't have the support for him." Remember that? It was like, "Oh, you didn't have enough support." Yet his freak talent shine through. They have since built a team around it. The money comes. You have the talent, the money comes, and they build around it because they see the opportunity. Israel Premier Tech will find the money if they see the potential of a Tour de France contender. The money,
I guess they have the money. It's just where is it going would be the I mean, should we talk about that for a second? Kind of a weird subplot of this whole race that Froome is in. There's reports in L'Equipe that he's doing the Tour this year, which I that's true. I don't know if that's like the best use of a Tour spot, but not only that, he might be leading the team, and he's at this race finishing 20, 30 minutes down on mount stages while his teammate is fighting for the overall win. I mean, that just seems like a bad situation that's getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely didn't perform that well in the Dauphiné. I would be surprised if they bring him to the Tour, but he has won. He can still bring value to a team like that, because the guy knows a lot of what it takes to be a leader of a team, and can probably help keep his teammates level-headed. I don't know what the whole vibe is with in terms of him inside of his team, but there's no question that he can bring some value to the younger riders.
And guys,
go ahead, JB. The report suggested it was like a Premier Tech push, but that's a Canadian company. I'd imagine Derek G riding so well would be more exciting to them than the fact is Froome, I guess, is a big name. But if he's not performing, the value of having him there is debatable. Yeah. If he's not in the front of the race.
Well, and there's no doubt that now they're winning. I mean, they're guys like Mike Woods won the stage last year. Derek G is on incredible form. I mean, they have definitely a lot of chances to win stages, which I think they should really put the emphasis and the focus on that. And
next year is Froome's last year. That frees up a bunch of money. So there's time. Yeah. There's time for him. Last super quick parting thoughts from both of you. George first.
Oh, exciting race. I'm excited to see what happens at the Tour of Switzerland. It's great to see Matteo Jorgenson crushing it. Going to be, I think, even better at the Tour de France. Derek G, standout performance. Primož, I mean, what a beast. The guy can suffer like nobody's business, could barely get food out of his pocket after damage in his shoulder, still wins the race. It's lining up to be an exciting tour. I just hope they get those watts per kg up a little bit more comparable to what Pogačar was doing in the Giro. And then we'll have a real great race on our hands in July.
All right, Spencer.
I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to sneak a few in. To make sure we mention them, Mats Pedersen wins the opening stage. Looks fantastic. Fantastic. That little Trek lead out was incredible. Magnus Kort wins the second stage. So you have the Danish invasion there. I think both those guys are going to win tour stages. Uno X, George's team. That team really impresses me. I'd love to see them get a tour stage win. And then I don't know that there's some oddness with Soudal Quickstep. It kind of got overshadowed with Remco, the struggles, not struggles. But so he's there with Mikael Landa, I guess, who's ostensibly his domestique. But Landa was just kind of on his own program, it seemed like. It seemed like they never really linked up in the mountains. Like on stage 6, Landa finishes 53 seconds back. His teammate, who at the time is still a GC threat, finishes 42 seconds back. So I don't know how much they were working together, but it seemed like Evenepoel was alone basically the whole last half of that climb. And then on stage 8, it's just like Landa and Remco never really seemed to link up. So I'm curious to see how that all meshes and who thinks who is the leader going into the tour.
Yeah, I think the first day after the time trial, when Landa seemed to help Remco out a little bit. And I think once they realized that Remco wasn't able to match, the Rogliches and the Jorgensens on the climb, I think they probably just gave Landa a free card where, like, if you can hang on, try to hang on. Because, at that point, they probably wanted to try to get another stage win. But I think if needed at the Tour or even the Welter, if he does that, the roles will be a lot more established once they get to the big show.
The thing that complicates it is Landa's just so good. Like, he's surprisingly good. Like, he got 5th at the Vuelta last year. If Remco has let's say a bad opening week of the Tour, they could find themselves in a difficult position where they think, is Landa's good enough? He could finish top 5 in this Tour de France. Do we back that, or do we go all in for Remco?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that's going to have to be decided on the road, and see how they're riding.
All right, and I'm not going to force you guys to make tour predictions. It's a weird year. It's a weird year. And we still have to get through the Tour of Switzerland. And as George said earlier, we need to see more of what, like, Bernal's looking right now. So there's
I would say no. Sorry for the spoiler, but Tadej Pogačar is winning the Tour. Sorry to
he's just, I know, we
moment.
all know that. He's just got to stay upright, though. Stay healthy and stay upright. And he's got it. All right, we'll be back in 1 week for our Tour of Switzerland recap, exactly 1 week from now. And then it's on to the Tour de France. We'll all be getting back together in Colorado, although Spencer will be in France. So we may be doing some check-in with him. We're looking forward to that as well. Guys, thank you for your time. Our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in 1 week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.